Carrico, Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Smith, Ms. Zucolo, Mr. Swanson, Mr. Long, Mr. Kirkstra, Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Steroid. We have a quorum.
I have not received anything for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Any public comment? Moving on, for the approval of the minutes from January 15th, 2010, take a motion by Mr. Burns, second by Mr. Fairfield. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Chief Judge Kramer is not here, so up next we'll have Circuit Clerk Sandy Cianci. In your packet you have a copy of the January reports and February reports. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Carrico. Good morning, Sandy. Comments on your report, please.
Well, there's 2 months worth, so
January's at the back of the packet if you haven't found it yet.
I don't really have anything for the disbursement list for either one of them. And then I can refer to the February one for the collections. Okay. The state's attorney collection court, it looks like we only got the January report right now. And it's not too far off from where we normally are. That one, yeah, this report.
It's got February written on the top of it.
I don't know how, anyway, we'll figure out how to we'll get the February report in next month with March on that one. It's collection season right now with tax season. Everyone's bringing in their money by the boatloads. Someone brought their they paid for a ticket in quarters or something the other day, so we had, $100 or $200 worth of quarters to load up, so that was kind of fun. So then for the Harris & Harris collection, we're kind of still right in where we were last year. We're a couple $1,000s behind, but like I said, March is going to be big. People come in and they pay their money. The local debt recovery program is still working for us through the comptroller. So for those of you that are new to this committee, the courts decide what cases, or they just, if people don't show up or if they have money that they still owe, it gets referred to the state's attorney for collection. Then our office loads up electronic files and sends it to our outside collection agency, which is Harris & Harris. They then start working the collections, but then in January we upload an electronic file that they've gone through and they've decided which ones they want to send off to the comptroller. Then I send that off to the comptroller, and then there they have the ability to go after their state taxes, or if they've won lotto winnings, they can collect from those, or if they are a state employee, then their wages can be garnished to help pay some of their fees and assessments that they owe. It's a busy program. We have a lot of calls, a lot of people coming in. People are happy to get the numbers off their record and get moving on their payments. So it's been a pretty good program so far. Does anybody have any questions about collections?
No questions. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
So then computerization, we're still working on the mapping and for the e-file. It's a very long and arduous process. I've been on different conference calls with Tyler Technologies, Courtview, the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts. They're kind of keeping everybody in line and kind of keeping everybody honest so that we can keep moving forward. I have one employee that is doing the mapping and working with both companies, so they're testing files. When they send them back and forth, then they find the errors, and they're remapping and trying to figure that out. So we're close. Once we get like one case type that will send and receive e-filing without error, then we're going to test the other case types. We have thousands and thousands of codes that need to be mapped together, and it's just a very long process. So hopefully we'll get that together soon.
By the time we get that up and running, it's gonna be outdated.
Well, that's already happened actually, but Chief Judge Kramer is actually comfortable with that, because then we can keep, we don't have to go back and change more. We're able to change it before it's finished. So yeah, we've lapped around that already.
Questions on the computerization for Sandy?
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. Up next, State's Attorney, Mr. Rowe. In your package, you have a copy of the January report and a copy of the February report. Take a motion to approve. Ms. Parker, second by Mr. Byrne. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Comments on your reports?
I see we're up to 162, and we do have another grand jury tomorrow. I think there's another 40 on that one. Pretty consistent year after year. You see the most prevalent crimes against people are those felony aggravated domestic batteries. That means repeat offender, agbat strangulation, or great bodily harm. Just continues. So.
Any questions on his reports? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Only other thing, you hear a lot of talk recently in the news about eliminating cash bail, about people being in jail, held in custody pending trial that shouldn't be. Just the other day, Trent Bukowski sent me a list of every inmate, every local inmate that's in custody, with their charges as well as what their bond amounts are. And I went through that list, and I can tell you, out of close to 300 people, you're looking at probably 3 or 4 who are in there for a legitimate nonviolent offense, right? Everyone else is in there for violent crimes. They're selling heroin in the community, gun offenses, ag domestic battery, strangulation, child molestation, failure to report as a sex offender. I mean, people that deserve to be in custody. And the ones that you look at, those 4 or 5, they have 6 pending felonies. They may all be retail thefts, but they have 6 of them. And they were released on a recognizance bond, which is basically where you just sign yourself out, and then they didn't appear at the next court date. So then they issue a warrant, and they get them in custody, and then that warrant gets quashed, or they bond out on that, and they don't appear at the next court date. So then they get back into custody. So the bonds are naturally going to be higher for them because they continue to not appear. And when they don't appear, the county, the taxpayers have to invest resources in locating them, processing them again. So I don't think that that is anywhere near the situation. What you're hearing in the press, that is not what's happening in Kankakee County. And just in the last year or so, probably about a year and a half now, when Illinois passed its bail reform, where they split the offenses, we've talked about it before. Category A offenses, where a bond is presumed, and Category B, where they're presumed to be released on a recognizance. That means that the more violent crimes, more serious offenses, they're going to get a bond under that Bail Reform Act. But the less serious offenses, they're presumed not to. They're released pending trial. That's a pretty, I think it's worked. Okay, I wasn't a fan of it in the beginning. I was afraid that there were some offenses that maybe should have been A's that ended up in the B category. The legislature did correct that a little bit. But I say that to say it is really hard to get someone held pending trial. It's a really difficult thing these days because of that bail reform. So this idea that we might go even further and allow some of the people that are currently in custody back out onto the streets, that's concerning to me. I just got the list yesterday, so I went through, I looked at every single one of those cases. I'm going to put a better report for you together next month so you can see just what offenders are in our jail, what are they charged with, how long have they been there, and what are their bonds. And I think you're going to find that it's very reasonable. So, that's it.
Questions for Jim?
Oh, sorry. Oh.
Okay, hurry up and leave. Up next, Public Defender's Office, Mr. Penterwick. In your package, you have a copy of the January and February reports from the Public Defender's Office. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Fairfield, second by Ms. Parker. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning.
Congratulations. What, 25 years? You were on the paper yesterday?
Oh, wow, I missed that. All right, my bad. I thank and don't thank Mr. Rowe for that, but he helped me segue to make it a full 25 as opposed to there being a gap, which I will always appreciate to some degree. So, good morning, everybody. Just to kind of bootstrap or dovetail with what Mr. Rowe was talking about, the judges have been following the Bail Reform Act. I believe they've been applying the bonds correctly. So if there are people in jail, there's a good faith reason why they're in custody. I reviewed the reports that I submitted, backlog. I mean, we are not resolving as many cases in the last 2 months as we've been receiving. That happens. I did have occasion to get a custody list from the Assistant Chief of Corrections, Schultz, regarding all the people in jail, the length of custody. And out of the top 15 people in custody, which some have been in custody for thousands or over 1,000 days, I left my phone. I have it on my phone, but out of the top 15 people, I think only 3 of them, and I have the hard numbers at my office, but only 3 of them are public defender clients. All the other clients are private, they have private attorneys. So they're paying someone thousands and thousands of dollars to have them languish in jail for literally over 1,000 days. So I found that to be very interesting. A lot of them are still pending trial, some are pending sentencing, but at the end of the day, the large majority of the longest incarcerated people have private counsel. I agree with Mr. Rowe as far as, there's now a jail Vivitrol program that we have, but the people have to be in jail in order to get evaluated for Vivitrol to see if they're eligible and to receive the shot. You have to be clean before you can receive Vivitrol, so if they get bonded out and they go out and use again, that program is useless. So it is a very complicated situation. I think we all have the same goal here, is to reduce crime, reduce recidivism, and all we can do is keep plugging along on that. Other than that, I have nothing else to add. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? We have a motion and a second on his reports. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Good enough.
Thank you, sir. Up next, probation. Mr. Latham, you have a copy of the January and February reports in your packet. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Lear, second by Mr. Eckhoff. Good morning, Tom. Good morning. Comments on your report?
Nothing to add to the monthly report unless there's any questions on it.
Questions? Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Juvenile detention report.
Yes, which is on the screen here, and it's also in your packet. Before we get into the numbers, just to give some of the board members that a little bit of background. We entered this agreement in 1999 with Will County to own 25% of their facility, or 25%, so 25 of 100 beds, or 26 of 102 beds actually.
Can we get it? Trent, can we get this up on the screen?
It's on there.
Oh, I'm looking over there.
Oh yeah, it's on there.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea behind it was we had 25 beds. We paid 25% of the operational cost of the facility and 25% of any salaries that were reimbursed by the state. Detention centers, juvenile detention centers, are operated just like probation departments, under the authority of the chief judge, and they receive state reimbursement for their salaries like I do. So we entered into that agreement. The big reason was during the 80s and early 90s, or throughout the 90s, juvenile detention numbers and juvenile numbers overall were very high. And we were using different facilities around the state to detain these minors at any given time. I think at one point we had minors in 10 different facilities around the state and transporting those individuals back. It was, at the time, it made sense to do what they did. And that was entered into an agreement. We had 25 beds waiting for us, and it was right up in Will County. Okay, but then, after some years while in the agreement, things just changed with the state. A lot of different initiatives to reduce juvenile populations or juveniles in custody, get them out of custody quicker. Similar to what we're seeing with the adult world now, with the Bail Reform Act they were just talking about. It's to get people out of custody and get them, reduce the jail population. So with that, I hope that made sense. I wanted to show you some of the numbers that, as things changed, what we're looking at. I don't know, does somebody have a clicker, or do I have the? Okay.
Yeah.
So this right here is a simple graph that shows the difference in, I think it's yellow, is what we paid. And remember, we paid 25%. Most of that cost was fixed. It was medical contracts and different things like that. So the orange line is what we would have paid if we would have paid the daily rate of $140. We didn't have this agreement. We were part of this, like a lot of counties aren't. If we'd have paid $140, that's what we'd have paid every year compared to what we did pay. So you can see it's a big difference. Now the next slide breaks that number down. Let me explain this a little bit. As you can see, looking at fiscal year 2010, and this will be the same for the next two pages for every year. You can see our total cost that year was a little over $1.2 million. We paid about $103,000 on average every month. That broke down. We had 3,773 detention days that year, which, when you break that down, means we paid a daily rate, if you broke it down that way, of $330, $329 a day. Okay, and that underneath that, now if you go back to the left, under that 1.2 million, you see 528,000, 448,000. That's the 528,000 is what we would have paid at $140 a day rate. So you can see a huge difference there. I put 120 in there just because that's the state average, but Will County charges out of county juveniles $140 a day, so that's why we use that number. And that just goes, you can see fiscal year 11, if you go back over to the right, our daily rate was $550. Because you remember, every time we detained less juveniles that year, our cost per juvenile per day increased. Because again, most of those costs were fixed. So you can go through this page, and page 2, and you can just go down and see the daily rates. See how much we paid, how much we would have paid, and basically what it comes down to, if you switch, I'm sorry, Kelly, I'm going pretty fast here, but you go to the next page, this one right here. You can see the annual average cost over that time period from 2010 to 2017, before we looked into getting out of this agreement. The average annual cost is about just under $1.2 million a year. During that same time period, at $140 a day, we paid about $445,000. So you can see the major difference in the cost to that. Our highest detention day was $550. Our lowest was $264. So, and the reason we went back to 2010 is, one, it was a good number of years to go back, but that's also when they changed the juvenile age. Prior to that, anybody under the age of 17 was a juvenile. They changed the law to make it anybody under the age of 18 was now a juvenile. And we had this conversation in '89. It was just to compare apples to apples. So we didn't go past 2010 and then went forward with that. So we're looking at the same population on this that we'll be looking at going forward. So any questions so far? I'm kind of going through this kind of quick, if that makes sense. So obviously in 2018, the chairman went to make the move to end this agreement because obviously we could see the financial cost of that. So May 1st of 2018, we had a buyout. Will County bought us out of that, like $5.5 million. $2.5 million of that went to credit for bed rental for the next few years. Okay, so I could break that down for you. It's like the 2018 for the remainder of the year was $336,000 a year, or for the rest of that year for 12 beds. 19 was $600,000. 2020 was $625,000, and 21, I'm sorry, was $650,000, and then we have money going into fiscal year 22 We just don't know what that amount is right now. We're tracking that. That's what part of the point of this is so we know what the budget for in 2022. Okay, so you can see, you know, like I said, there was a lot of different initiatives that changed this. All the juvenile JDAI, juvenile detention alternative initiatives that changed the direction of detaining juveniles. Could things swing back? Maybe, but I don't think anybody sitting in this room getting reports from anyone about Springfield and where they're going sees that happening anytime soon. I mean, right now they're doing it with the adult population with bail reform. So they're still working on that, going that other direction of reducing jail populations. So I think and you can see with the amount of money per year that cost us, that even another 2, 3, or 4 years in the future, if we stayed in that agreement as it was, what that would have cost us. And there's other costs tied to this. This is just the cost that I dealt with, the operation side of things. There was other costs to that. So, as you can see in that last page, I'm sure this one right here, I think what we'll see with this with how we're doing it now, and after we get out of this where we're using credit and we go to just a daily rate, when we detain less juveniles any particular year, we're going to see the benefit of that. Obviously, we detain less cost. And I think during the same time period we were in this agreement that we're talking about here, we had an average detention days every year, about 3,100 detention days we used. We would have had to have over 9,000 detention days to start bringing that daily cost down to 140. And it's really not that simple, because I know that many more people being detained, costs are going to go. But we would have had to detain over 9,000, or have detention days over 9,000 on average, to bring that down to where it's around 140. So we were way off on how many. Any questions about that? Nothing? Make sense? No?
This
Okay.
makes sense for what Andy did.
Yeah.
Yes.
He spoke of the other costs too. When the bond ended, was the time that we could have this discussion about a new agreement, and it took about a year and a half to negotiate it. Obviously, the first offer wasn't what we ended up with, but we also pay 25% of the maintenance of the building, and for the staff of the building, and so that's not even here. That's on top, and this was a good deal, not because I did it. It was one that had to be done. And it was good that Will County stepped up and they realized that they still wanted to work with us after this was all over with. Because obviously they don't have a lot of partners in filling those beds up there, so it's all landed costs to those guys. So in going forward, I believe, are they at 120 or 140 right now? I think they gave us 120. I have to look back at the paperwork.
Yeah, their daily rate is set at 140 for other counties.
Right, for other counties. I think I have to look back again. I think we were at 120. They gave us, but I'll look back. But regardless, there's other options too. So if we find somebody that may be going a little bit longer, we may look at other facilities. But this one's if it's up there, they got to be back here. I think it's the next day. For now, juveniles have to be back the next day. We're not going to go to Danville. We're not going to go down to Southern Illinois. We've got Will County as a partner. But if someone who might be there for a little bit of time, then maybe we'll look at other options. So there is flexibility built in this for the future. But I just will ask Tom to do this so this committee would know, and finance, when we need to build this in the budget. We just don't react to what happens today. We kind of need to know that for FY22, we're going to have to cover off that difference to keep an eye on it. But it's half of what it used to be. And I hope that resonates. So that's money we don't have to spend. So that's all I can.
I think with the current trend, we get charged with beds over the 12. That's what we're watching here, which cuts into our balance going into 2022, which is what we're watching. I think we'll go into 2022 with about a $250,000 balance to work with, and we just have to make any adjustments beyond that. So, and there's also something else to point out that is, like I said, they get a salary reimbursement like probation does. And during this agreement, and you've seen it where my allocation was cut, and the county had to give me more money to run my department. Well, the same thing when half the detention would get cut at the same time. So we had 25% so if they got a $300 or $1 million shortfall, we got a big bill for our 25% of that allocation shortfall. So there's kind of a double whammy there, so that we won't have to worry about that part of it going forward. So,
Mr. Wheeler?
Wrap that up. That was part of the issue as well. When we didn't have money, back when this, 3 years ago, we had less than no money, actually. We had, what was that, about $2 million we owed them?
oh yeah.
Yeah, it was, we just couldn't pay the bill, and so that was part of this deal, was to wipe away our debt. Our accounts receivable was reduced as well. So, to that point, we would just get an extra bill because of, hey, we put a new roof on, and you get 25% of that. Hey, appreciate it, thanks
Yeah.
for telling
Yeah.
me after you did it, so, or a new parking lot, things like that. So, that part just wasn't, we couldn't handle that anymore. But it took about a year and a half for the right deal to get done.
And the
so.
allocation shortfall, I mean, and Steve McCarty would call me right away because we'd get this bill for $300-something thousand one month. And that would happen every year at least once. And because I allocate off every month for our salaries. Those reimbursements come back, as you know, here months later. And so they might get their reimbursement back for, if it was right now, for September, October, November. And here's the shortfall, and we would just get a bill. And it was, so we didn't really know it was coming. We kind of knew, but we didn't know when that would get hit. And that's 1 month $70,000 bill, next month's $380,000. That's kind of a big hit. But anyway, so that's all I had. Unless there's any more questions.
Any questions for Tom?
I wanted to have it in your packet so you could look at it. If you call me if there's any questions. The only other thing is drug court graduation is March 26th at 10:30. I believe there's 4 graduates. So, in 10:30 in courtroom. It's the 3rd floor. I'm not sure if it's 300 or 300. It's probably in 300. It's usually where they do it. But.
One more quick question before you get out. How's the ankle bracelet working for the juveniles?
It's working. I mean,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's working. I'd have to look at my report if I could find it in here how many we have on. But it's there's 2 or 3 on. It's worked well. We haven't had any violations with it. We get on every day, track where their movement. It's worked. And I know City Police Department's real happy because they were having a lot of those issues, and it's working. So, and I've not seen a huge rate. We're not using a lot of it, which is a good thing.
Good.
It didn't take off, and now we got all these juveniles on GPS. They're putting the right people on, so it's working well.
Good. Any other questions for Tom? Thank you.
Thanks.
Chief McCabe. Everybody should have received a copy electronically of the sheriff's report, and you also have one in your packet. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Swanson, second by Mr. Byrne. I had to look around the poll to make sure you were still back there. Pull your mic down. Comments on the report?
Nothing of significance. The only thing that really kind of stands out is the calls for service from 2019 to 2020. They're up over 1,000. And just looking at what we're doing and statistics and our citations and things, I think a lot of those are generated because we have a lot of traffic enforcement going on. We're trying to push that fatal number down, and traffic enforcement's a funny thing is as enforcement drops off, we see our fatals go up, and it's a lot to do with perception. If folks think you're out there watching, they're going to drive a lot carefuler. You drive different in the city of Chicago than you do in a small town because you think, in a small town the police are watching. So we're trying to get out there, and our guys and girls are out there getting out there, being visible, stopping folks, trying to slow them down and save lives, because it's just every one of those traffic fatalities has a family and a story behind it, and they're usually very sad. Any questions about the report?
Questions? You have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Animal control update?
I don't really have anything. I would just like to compliment Carrie Laird for jumping in with both feet. She's doing a heck of a job. I know she's coming in on the weekends to do things and clean the kennels, and she's dragging her kids and her husband with her, and he's happy about that because sometimes those are his days off. But she's doing well. It's a huge learning curve when you step into a a management position in an organization that you weren't part of beforehand, and she's adapted well, and we're pretty proud of her. So, any questions? Do you want to announce the notary coming down, or so people stick around and?
Go ahead, try that one.
Okay. Those people that brought their affidavits for the FOIA today, there's a notary coming down at the end. Well, she's going to be here in a minute to watch you sign and notarize your affidavit. So if you can hang around after the meeting and make sure I get those copies, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, just two other things I'd like to mention about the cash bail reform. It has been my experience, in my humble opinion, that not all of them, but a lot of career criminals are criminals because they don't do what they're supposed to do. And if they don't have any skin in the game, like cash bond, and there's nothing holding them to appear in court, they don't appear in court. And then we get a warrant, and we go get them, we bring them in, and they get recogged again, and then they don't show up, and it ties up Mr. Rowe's office, it ties up our office. So unfortunately, our legislators don't ask the practitioners. I know Rob and Chad do a heck of a job going through that list, and they always have, and they look for those individuals, and they're in contact with Mr. Rowe's office, and his attorneys do a great job also of, looking and saying, okay, we need to move this person out of here. Some other places don't do it. I think we're being punished for the sins of others, like Cook County, where they'll cherry pick a retail theft guy that's been in there for 6 months and say, see, we told you. Well, that doesn't happen here. And that's compliments to our administration and Mr. Rowe's office. And my last thing would be to compliment Andy Wheeler, because he's modest. This whole detention center thing, he said it's not a good idea because it was yours, but it's a good idea for the taxpayers. It seemed to make sense at the time when we did it, but the numbers didn't hold out, and that he's watching over the dollars, the taxpayer dollars like that. It's a huge savings for the county, and we appreciate him doing that. Any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Up next, we have the coroner. In your package, you have a copy of the January report and the February reports. What's that? Oh, yes.
I just realized, because I saw the January reports in here, are we approving the reports from January because there's no agenda item with the current reports? Is that assumed with the motion?
Yeah. With,
I just want to make sure.
Combine,
because
we're combining.
We're combining those.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just want-
Morning, sir.
Top of the morning, Dave.
Okay, take a motion to approve, Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Snipes. Comments on your report?
Not really. It's self-explanatory, other than the fact is our autopsies are on now on the uprise. So we're mentioning that. I will mention that in just a few minutes, exactly where we're at. If you want me to, if you have to prove that. Or...
No, go ahead, make your comments there first.
Our ODs are on our way up. At this point right now, we're at 11 overdoses, 4 pending that we know are going to be positive for ODs. If you go back from 2018 and 2019, it was May 7th and May 3rd when we reached that number. So we're on the uprise and on track, as our autopsies are on track right now to 54, which in 2017 we were at 56, over 80,000 over our budget. So I been knocking my head off trying to figure out what's happening. Then I hear stuff like people being released from jail. I just wonder if sometimes that's not going back to the back to ODs, going back to their old what they used to do. Our average age is still at 42. As I talked last year, the females were kind of coming up last year. This year they're a little bit down, but other than fact is the drug being used right now is going back to the old way on cocaine. Heroin's still around, but they go to cocaine, but there's a mixture that we're seeing of fentanyl into that cocaine, which remind yourself fentanyl is 80 to 100 more powerful than morphine itself. We're seeing the different types of fentanyl in our area, which is not good. And now we're seeing an uprise in alcohol out of the alcohol mixture with THC. So it's something we're keeping an eye on. I'm letting you know way ahead of time here because I don't like to see that where we're on track to. So I want to point that out to you, and hopefully as the months go by, I can bring it down. Our education's starting again. We're going to the different schools. We'll be out and about again as we did last year. I do have to agree with Chief McCabe that that we're on our way down with fatalities. As you notice, there was only 3 fatalities, which is I think is very good compared to what was last year's.
Comments, questions for Bob? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The only other thing I want to point out to you is in our morgue that was built in 2005, we're having some problem with the walls wise, it's paint wise. It still got the paint in 2005. We're going to repaint the morgue. I'm going to redo the bathrooms from the tile to the painting, not only in the morgue into our office. And I'm going to look at all of you and say it's not going to cost the county 1 cent. It's coming out of my coroner's fees, so I can improve the area which we work in. This is a fine place we have out here. It should be kept updated, and that's my goal. And it's going to start here. We're paying. There's no union. I know we have to do it union-wise there, but there's no union tilers around here that come out of Chicago. So we're paying prevailing wages. I should say I am. So all that expense there hopefully will improve our area. We're updating our facility out there to make it still the #1 morgue other than Cook County's in the state of Illinois, and I'm going to continue to do that, updating that. I just wanted to let you know that's not any expense from the county for what we're doing.
Thank you. Any questions for Bob? Mr. Wheeler.
I have one. Bob, have you heard anything about that piece of legislation that was trying to change the coroners to be only medical examiners? Have you heard about any movement or changes to that? It's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. When we meet, all the coroners are going to meet here at the end of first part of April. That is a big subject. We do have a hold of the sponsors, and we have talked about them. That you're in our area, we're blessed to have 2 board-certified forensics in our neighborhood, and also with 2 backups of board-certified forensics. Where there's 12 in Cook County, and then there's only like 3 to 4. So it's almost impossible to do that because we'd have to move out of here to probably go to Will County or to DuPage County or wherever, and I don't want that to happen. So being secretary of the Illinois Coroners there, I'm on it quite heavily, and I've talked to the chairman about that. It's a big factor. I certainly in the long run, want to keep the coroners because I don't think, the amount of money it'll cost us traveling would be outstanding for our community. So,
Thank you. It's just there's already a shortage of MEs, and now they want to make it so you have to be an ME to be a coroner, and it's
split the Illinois up is what the governor wants to do.
makes no sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Makes no sense, but I am on that. And I'll continue to report on that. Hopefully, it's more on a positive note.
Yep.
You know me, I'll get right
you
into
live
it.
it
Mr. Snipes has a question.
If they would have done that, that would be a tremendous increase in cost when you're dealing with medical examiners because those are doctors. And so they would not, I don't think they'll succumb to what a coroner actually receives now. So that would be a tremendous increase in cost. And the other thing is they have to remember is that coroners are actually police officers. They are investigators of wrongful death. and not so much of the pathology part of it. They kind of hired that out. So it's more the investigation part that's more important when you're dealing with coroners. That I don't think an MD or the medical examiner, which would just examine the body and make a report, would kind of get into. The police work is not really a part of their profession.
Well, I can guarantee you they won't go out in the field.
Any other comments for the coroner? Thank you, 35-year man.
That was hard celebration. Thank you.
Yes. Is there any old business to come before the committee? Any old business? Any new business? Any new business? Take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Fairfield, second by Mr. Carrico. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Anybody that needs to sign the affidavit, just hang on till they get here.